Chapter 221. News heard, news to find too. Meeting Prince Laika was quite easy. The place where the prince had taken Jean for treatment was known only to his acquaintances or verified figures. The gatekeepers opened the door for Jean without asking any questions. Fortunately, Prince Laika was on vacation at his summer house, which was a relief for Jean, who had expected to wait at least several hours before being able to see the prince. Oh, what a pleasant surprise. Welcome, Lord Jean. Laika dismissed the guards. This was the level of trust one received for bearing the Runcandle name within Huffaster. Long time no see, Prince Laika. Your companions seem to be the ones who searched for you in the east of Delki last time. Please excuse our previous intrusion. Kashmir silently bowed, to which Laika waved his hand. Please don't mention it. None of ours were injured anyway. In any case, it seems you have an urgent matter to discuss, Lord Jean. You have sought me out without prior notice. Yes, I must locate a man very urgently. Please tell me more about it. I need the man who has recently been distributing deadly poisons to Delki's mercenaries. I must find him alive. Laika's eyes sparkled. Jean saw the glimmer in his eyes and naturally expected him to negotiate, as he did when he acquired the rights to the gold mine and was promised guardian knights after saving Jin's life. Jean was open to bargaining. Undoubtedly, finding Kazan before Joshua deserved the effort. I suppose I could assign several more guardian knights. Jean was thinking about that when Laika broke into a big smile. That's not too difficult then. I'll tell you his whereabouts. We have been searching for him as well and have already secured his location. To Jin's surprise, Laika didn't demand anything. He even drew him a map. Laika was a man who knew how to maintain valuable contacts. I won't ask what it's about, Lord Jean. And if you need anything, I am at your service. Ah, and perhaps this might help you. Laika handed him the mark of the Delki royal family. Though it was nothing compared to the shield of the Runcandle family's black sword, Laika remembered that Jean was currently a provisional flag-bearer. He gave Jean the shield so he could overcome any tricky situations he might encounter while in Delki. It was a very considerate gesture. I won't forget this favor. After a brief farewell, they left the mansion. Heavens! It seems like I'm always pressed for time. The map pointed to a small town south of Delki. Jean and his companions entered a portal to the south and immediately rented horses to ride to the town. Jin's group arrived in the south. At the same time, another group of people arrived at Prince Laika's mansion. They were Runcandle execution knights. Prince Laika, there's someone we urgently need to locate. Who could that be? A man has been circulating deadly poisons among the mercenaries recently. The second flag-bearer of the Runcandle family has ordered his capture. Oh, I have also recently ordered his arrest. His location will be found within a day or two, so rest assured. If Kazan is selling the poison, he must be in a desperate situation. Jean pondered what that meant throughout the journey to the town. Kazan was naively exposing himself, considering all his training as a hound. It was as if he was begging to be found. Is this the smell of blood? They arrived at the house marked on the map. Reeked of blood from the entrance. Upon opening the door, the group encountered Kazan. His hair was disheveled, and a beard covered his tired face. It was almost difficult to recognize him at first glance, even though he wasn't wearing any disguises. He seemed to have been waiting for Jean and didn't startle at their arrival. What a spectacle! I thought you'd be rich selling all those poisons. And here I am. Glad to see you. Kazan didn't reply and silently stared at Jean. But Jean sensed an unspoken desperation in his gaze. You must have been truly desperate to expose your location so easily. Let's go to a safe place and talk. I suppose you wanted me to find you before Joshua. Or am I mistaken? You're correct. Where's Beriz? In the back room. Entering the room revealed the source of the blood smell at the entrance. It had come from there. Beriz was tied to the bed due to Kazan's desperate attempt to stabilize her from her convulsions. Beriz was unconscious and coughing up blood. Jean understood that it was the final symptom of mana reflux. If Beriz wasn't treated immediately, she would die. I see. So you revealed your location because you had no way to treat berries. It wasn't something that could be treated simply with money. This was particularly grave in the allied realms of Huffister because there were less than 5 healers who could treat the late stages of mana reflux in the region. And as Kazan was practically being hunted for capture, he had no way of meeting those people. They couldn't leave Huffister to reach the Lutero Magical Federation. Although Kazan and Berries had dozens of fake passes, each and every one of them was from Joshua. It was impossible to pass through Huffister's portals with those passes. Similarly, they couldn't smuggle themselves out without someone trustworthy. In addition to all these things, Berries was dying. Kazan's hand was forced. The last move he could make was to reveal his location and hope that Jean would be the first to reach him. If it weren't for Berries' condition, Kazan would have lived hidden for years, waiting for an opportunity to meet Jean. Kazan knelt down. "Save her." "No, I beg you, sir. Please save her. I will do whatever you ask. I will pay for my past sins for the rest of my life." Kashmir and Elisa looked at each other in surprise at Kazan's actions. They had thought that Kazan and Berries were villains who had no sense of loyalty or faithfulness. Quicantle, on the other hand, maintained a cold gaze. "I will decide whether to take you in or not after you prove your worth. But we will discuss that after saving your friend," Jean responded. After which he checked on Veri's condition. "This is worse than I thought. She won't survive without the Vankila priests." Berries was now nothing more than a shattered piece of crystal. The opportunity for first aid had long passed, and there was nothing they could do. The biggest problem was that moving her was not going to be easy. You might not realize this because you're not a sorcerer, but in her current state, putting her on a horse carriage could shatter her entire body. She's in such a condition that even the slightest impact would damage her bones and internal organs. "It's too late," Jean said. Kazan couldn't respond. He could only hang his head. Jean felt a little bit of compassion for him. After all, they had nearly killed him when they first met in Delki. But if one thought about it carefully, Kazan and Berries had only been manipulated and harmed by people associated with the run candles from the beginning. They were recruited for the sacrifice of the moon before they could even walk. Then they obeyed Taemun Marius as if she were their mother or someone even greater than her, stopping at nothing to carry out her orders. After Taemun's death, they became Joshua's hounds without realizing that he was their true enemy, and they only learned the truth when they met Jean. In fact, Taemun didn't leave them even the briefest of messages in her death. Taemun's love and concern belonged only to Luna Runcandle, Jin's sister, until the very end. What was the result of all that? Berries was on the verge of death, and Kazan was now pleading for his enemy's help at his feet. If Jean neglected them, they would be at Joshua's mercy. "We'll try to transport her. But if we encounter Joshua's forces in the process, we may have to abandon her." "Understood." Jean saw that Kazan's eyes were bloodshot as he nodded. It seemed like he might start shedding tears of blood at any moment. "Thank you." Elisa immediately removed her robe after Jean made his decision. She then wrapped Berries in her robe and tied it with a rope to keep her from moving. A couple of bones in her limbs broke in the process, but Jean thought it was the most appropriate measure given the circumstances. "I've experienced something like this on joint missions with the Magic Squadron when I was in the special group. This is what the Magic Squadron leader taught me, that it's better to tie them up to extract them." Jean and Quicantle were also aware of it. The pressure from the ropes would undoubtedly hurt her bones, but broken bones were much better than suffering damage to her organs from movement. Bound with multiple rolls of rope around her, Berries looked like a corpse ready to be incinerated. Even if they managed to keep her alive, she would never be the same again. Jean wanted to take Berries to Tychon. Then he would bring healers for the initial round of treatments and head to Vankila to negotiate with the priests there. Only then could Berries survive. "We just have to reach the south portal gate. Hopefully, your friend can hold on until then. Our 2 passes have been listed for arrest. It won't matter because I have the mark of the Delki royal family with me. It will leave a trail of movement, but Joshua can't set foot in Tychon anyway. Due to the circumstances, they couldn't make Berries travel on horseback. Jin's group had to carry berries in their arms and walk carefully until they reached the portal gate. It will take us about 3 hours if we walk fast enough. Lord Jin, there will be too many eyes on us. Since the portals were the central institutions of every city, they were located right at the heart of it, connected to its major avenues and boulevards. It was noon, which meant the streets were bustling with people. It was also a terrible time to be walking around carrying something in a robe that was dripping with blood. We can always have the defense guards or security guards accompany us with the royal mark, but I'm concerned that the news might reach Joshua's forces, given the peculiar circumstances. As long as Joshua's subordinates didn't take the form of guardian knights or execution knights, the group would never fall prey to a threat, but it was highly likely that Beres would die in battle. All eyes turned toward them as they stepped onto the street. Many civilians screamed or covered their mouths upon seeing the blood-stained robe that clearly contained a person inside. They soon encountered defense guards and security forces as well. But fortunately, either they left after a greeting or volunteered to watch over them as soon as they saw the royal mark. Of course, Jin declined all their services. I knew it. This was never going to be easy. Sir Kashmir, we have company. Chapter 222. News heard? News to find 3. 2. No. It's 3. Kashmir spoke without turning his head to take another look. Elisa and Quicantle realized they were being followed as well. Only Kazan, who had all his attention focused on Beres, was startled and started to concentrate. We're moving on the main road and we stand out, so it was only a matter of time. Quicantle shook his head as if finding it troublesome. The good news is that they're not Run Candle Knights. If they were Guardian Knights or Execution Knights, they wouldn't be following us. They would have simply attacked. This was Huffister, Run Candle territory. There was no reason for Run Candle Knights to bother following Jean, who was a reserve flag-bearer. If their pursuers were Run Candle Knights, Beres was undoubtedly a lost cause. But Jean would also have to give up on Kazan. That was the power the second Run Candle flag-bearer had obtained in Huffister. Undoubtedly, their group could take on 10 Guardian Knights by themselves. But engaging in a relentless battle against the Run Candles was completely different from fighting hounds unrelated to the clan. As much as possible, Jean preferred not to leave an official record of combat against the Run Candles for Elisa, Kashmir, and Quicantle. Which means those guys are hounds or informants of Joshua. What do you think we should do, Lord Jean? After thinking for a moment, Jean expressed his opinion. They would have alerted the higher authorities as soon as they saw us. I don't think they have a direct line to Joshua, so one of them must be rushing right now. That means they are a group of 4, not 3. 3 people were following them. But as Jean predicted, they were actually 4. The other one started running at full speed when he noticed Jin's group. That guard hurried toward the south portal gate. Elisa? Yes, Lord Jean. I think you should run ahead of us toward the south portal gate. Whether toward the central region or the east, he would have to head where the knights are if he wants to notify them. One of them must be heading to the gate right now. Understood. Jean chose Elisa for the task because no one in the group was as skilled in tracking and pursuit as the former Special Forces agent. What should I do when I locate him? He's Joshua's man, so we can't let him live. Take him out, but without pain. Understood. Elisa didn't separate from the group immediately. Any abrupt movement was likely to be noticed, so she waited for Jin's instructions for everyone before carrying out her task. And Kazan. Yes, sir. It's time to test your skills. Kill the remaining 3. Should I do it when we reach the forest paths? No, right now. Can you do it? They were on the main road at noon. Killing 3 people without any repercussions under such conditions was only possible for high-level assassins from the anonymous Asterisk formerly known as No Names. But Kazan nodded without hesitation. Yes, I can. The response surprised Jean. Ah, really? Fortunately, I have a poison that would be perfect for it. The deadly poison that turned people into unidentifiable black puddles wasn't the only one Kazan possessed. With the right ingredients, Kazan could prepare thousands of poisons, some specialized in discreet assassinations. You mustn't be noticed under any circumstances. Understood, sir. I'll pretend to buy drinks at that stall over there and poison them. Then I'll rejoin the group, and you can continue walking as if nothing happened. What will happen to them? They'll try to keep an eye on me as I walk away from the group, but they'll keep following you. They'll keep walking, completely unaware that they're already poisoned. They'll collapse about 5 minutes later. If they don't receive treatment within the next 10 minutes, they'll die. What? Is it possible to kill people like that? Jean couldn't contain his surprise. Even Quickantle's eyes widened. It seems you're resorting to extreme measures for the sake of the woman's life. Are you sure about that? Kazan left the group before Quickhantle could finish because he had already started on the least suspicious route toward the drink stall. The group looked at each other in silence. Jean intentionally shouted to Kazan, "I want the apple flavor," which led the rest to shout their preferred flavors as well. They continued walking as the drink vendors started preparing them, and their stalkers passed by Kazan. That was when Kazan spilled his drinks on them and sprayed poison on the 3 lurkers. The poison was designed to be absorbed through the skin to paralyze the nerves and ultimately lead to death. "I'm sorry." The 3 briefly looked at Kazan before continuing to chase the group. Kazan got new drinks and caught up with the group. "Are you done? Already?" "Yes. I investigated them, and they seem to be Joshua's local informants. They're nobody skilled, and I didn't recognize their faces. I think it should be safe now to send Lady Elisa to the portal gate." Jean thought of asking if he was sure, but he decided to trust him and send Elisa ahead. Since Bariza's life was at stake, Kazan must have completed his task successfully. Waiting for 5 minutes for them to collapse could sabotage their efforts. "Elisa?" Elisa nodded and handed Bariz to Kashmir. She then mounted the horse they had brought and rode off at full speed. The stalkers immediately responded to her. Another one of the 3 fell from their ranks. Exactly 5 minutes later, someone screamed behind them, "Look! Someone just collapsed here." Their stalkers suddenly fell to the ground, and civilians began screaming behind them. Their bodies solidified like rocks. They couldn't even move their fingers. It's a nerve poison made from toxins of the western desert spiders. It doesn't work on martial artists of 6 stars and above. It's a pretty weak poison that can be neutralized simply by drinking a few glasses of water. But if you don't know what it is, that's what happens. Kazan described it as if it was nothing special. The last one who fell from the group probably also hit the ground. "I'm glad I got the 1000 poison antidote." Jean was safe thanks to that drink, but the fact that his companions didn't have that immunity meant they could fall just as easily. It sent shivers down his spine. I suppose it would be good to have a poison master in Tychon. There were poison masters in the Runcandle clan as well, but Jean could only have access to them after becoming a flag-bearer. The road immediately filled with confusion. Jin's group continued walking slowly toward the portal. They arrived at the south portal 2 hours later. "You've arrived." Elisa smiled as the group arrived. "It went as I expected, Lord Jean." One of them broke away from the pack and ran toward the portal. "I took care of him and hid his body. The security forces will find him soon." It was only possible because Elisa was much stronger than him. They wouldn't have made it here safely if Joshua's informants had been skilled. Thanks to Elisa's work, their whereabouts had not yet reached Joshua. The portal guide initially denied them entry when he saw the group, but he opened the gates when Jean showed the royal mark. "You're with the royal family. Welcome. I wish you a safe journey." The group felt relieved as they entered the portal. "I've noticed that the citizens of this land seem to unconditionally support their leader." Quickhantle shrugged. After the factions loyal to the former king fell in the civil war, the faction led by the current ruling prince of Delki issued decrees that favored their people. It's no wonder the support is so high, although those companions were discarded after the civil war, of course. Kashmir spoke as he looked at Kazan and Bariz. "Well, Kazan Marius, your gamble paid off. Thank you. Forget about thanks. I want more immediate rewards like Joshua Runcandle. If you don't have valuable information about him, you can't join forces with me. Is that clear?" Kazan nodded with a heavy heart. But Jean didn't intend to discard Kazan. even if he didn't have any important information to provide. A man like him was very useful to Jean. Since he couldn't trust Kazan yet, Jean planned to keep an eye on him for some time. Well, regardless of the information, I will save your friend. Pray that the Vankila priests don't make ridiculous demands. The guide then informed them that the portal gate was opening, and soon they were engulfed in mana and its light. All the high-level healers in Taiken attended to Beres as soon as they returned. They performed the most complicated surgery ever conducted in Taiken. Kazan waited outside the operating room, feeling terribly anxious and nervous. Jean didn't force Kazan to give him any information about Joshua until the operation was over. Exactly 32 hours after starting the operation, the healers emerged from the room drenched in sweat. It was a success, all thanks to you bringing us the medicines we needed in time, Lord Jean. She only needs to rest in bed for some time, but she's not in danger of death. Another healer chimed in. However, if she doesn't receive additional treatments from the Vankila priests, she'll never be able to wield mana again. I see. Thank you all for your hard work. Upon hearing that Beres was safe, Kazan dropped to the floor and began crying. He sobbed with such desperation that it briefly cast a gloom over Jean. Gilly silently handed him a handkerchief. He couldn't stop thanking her as he took the handkerchief. This was something he had never experienced while serving under Taemun and Joshua. They were waiting for him to stop crying when Enya came running in search of Jean. Lord Jean, Yulian just woke up. Elisa headed to the basement first. Really? Gilly, do we have any sandwiches left? Yes, young master. Good. Let's go, Kazan. Things are going to get very tough for Yulian once Elisa starts interrogating him. So let's eat something and talk before that happens. You must be hungry too. You haven't eaten anything in the past 2 days. Yulian is here too? Yes. We brought him here after subduing him in the Bluebird Islands. Do you want to hear something more shocking than that? Jean continued after packing the sandwiches. There, I killed Joshua. But somehow, he's alive and showed up at the knighthood ceremony in the kingdom of Schutzeren. It's better for you or Yulian to know something about this phenomenon. Yulian looked dazed in the basement, his body tied up. Jean placed a sandwich in front of him and smiled. You have a deep sleep, Paytel contractor. Whether this becomes your last meal or not depends on your choice. Kazan, don't tell me you betrayed Sir Joshua? Joshua did all the betrayals around here. You almost died at his hands when Paytel manifested in you. So why don't we start this by discarding any loyalty toward that bastard? Chapter 223. News heard. News to find 4. Jean took a bite of the sandwich. It was Kazan who spoke first instead of Yulian. It's probably not loyalty. What? Unlike the other hounds, Yulian never acted out of loyalty to Joshua. He fears Joshua. Just Joshua's voice alone is enough to make his hands tremble. Yulian gritted his teeth at Kazan's description. Shut your mouth, Kazan. Am I saying something false? Beres and I followed Joshua out of our desire for revenge, and you did it out of fear for him. All of that means nothing now. I told you to shut up. If you also want to live, I suggest you cooperate with the young lord. Yulian's eyelids trembled violently. He was obviously doing his best to suppress his humiliation. Well, it's not so shameful to fear one's own lord. Jean released Yulian from the handcuffs. Let me warn you in advance. It would be better if you don't think about causing any trouble just because I released you from the chains, because you might end up realizing that there are others much more terrifying than Joshua. Well then, eat something first. Yulian's and Kazan's stomachs growled at the same time. They silently ate their sandwiches. Yulian's gaze shifted from Jean to Elisa as he ate. He seemed particularly guarded around Jean. He still had fragments of memories from the manifestation, so he knew how terrifying Jean Runcandle was. Unfortunately for him, the memories he had left were only of Jean dominating Paytel, because Yulian's consciousness awakened during the brief moments of extreme shock. So it's not loyalty but fear, huh? Maybe I can recruit this guy too, Jean thought. It was easy to control people who were deeply scared. You just had to eliminate the source of fear, plunge them into even greater fear, or help them become strong enough to overcome their own fears. The first one wasn't feasible at the moment, and the third one required time and effort. Since Jean didn't feel much attachment to Yulian anyway, he opted for the second method. It seems you've finished eating. Now let's get down to business. Yulian, I am Jean Runcandle. I am the younger brother of that bastard you serve and the contractor of Sodaret. And this is the free city of Tychon, the land my companions and I control. Yulian felt fear at the mere mention of his name and choked on his sandwich. He had been too busy fighting Murakan to hear his name in the Bluebird Islands. Yulian understood what Jean Runcandle meant to Joshua. Jean offered him some water and continued, "There's a good reason why I'm telling you all these things. First, I hope we can be honest and frank with each other, and second, I warn you that this is where you'll meet your untimely end if you don't. That should sum it up. Is that clear?" Yulian nodded eagerly, but he didn't do it willingly. Elisa grabbed him by the collar and forced him to nod after observing his reaction. "Good. I like your style. First question. What were all of you doing in the Bluebird Islands?" Unlike Kazan, Yulian hadn't yet given up his attachment to Joshua. Therefore, he looked down without any response. Kazan spoke with frustration. "We were in the Bluebird Islands to reinforce Yulian's powers on Joshua's orders." Joshua felt challenged by the man named Bamel. "Of course, it was only on the islands that I discovered that Bamel was actually you. There seems to be a way to strengthen Petal's divine power through Grams. Tomb. Is that something Yulian learned through Petal? No, Yulian has been under his command much longer than us. We were told that he has been strengthening his powers there occasionally since his childhood. Joshua was the one who told him about the method. I wonder if there was anything about Petal in the clan's secret archives. Anyway, Joshua also knew how to strengthen Petal's divine powers. Is that what you're saying? Sorry, I don't know anything about that. You'll have to hear the details from Yulian. Jean looked at Yulian. I have something to tell you. Back in the Bluebird Islands, your lord died. Did Sir Joshua die? Yulian's nervous gaze filled with horror. Yes. He used a Runcandle detonation move to kill me, and you were also about to die in his wake. He didn't seem to care at all if someone like you died or not in the process. I bothered to take you with me because I had a lot to ask. A brief silence followed. Yulian soon burst into bitter laughter. It was out of self-contempt. Jin's words helped Yulian make sense of everything. Why are you laughing? Is it because you already know that Joshua never died? Jean tossed the newspaper he had brought at Yulian's feet. It had the article reporting Joshua's attendance at the knighthood ceremony in Schutzeren. I clearly saw his body burn and die from the detonation move, but somehow he attends ceremonies the next day. It seems you know something about it. Yulian quickly scanned the article and its date. Then he looked Jean in the eyes. I suppose, after all, I was just Joshua's spare toy. What do you mean by that? Jean asked with a glint in his eyes. Of course, he wouldn't care about someone like me when he's suddenly presented with the unexpected opportunity to capture the Sodaret contractor he desired for so long. Now I understand the essence. Joshua intended to keep your contract if he ever failed to capture me. Or don't you agree? Yulian didn't respond. For a while, all he did was tremble with his fists tightly clenched. Just as Jean had assumed, Yulian was a kind of backup, an insurance in case Joshua couldn't snatch the contract from Jean. Joshua had several other contractors of that kind in his other secret locations. That's why Joshua had no reason to secure Yulian in the Bluebird Islands, because he thought it was the perfect opportunity to capture Jean without repercussions. However, the appearance of Garmund reversed his luck, and Joshua chose to detonate himself. It didn't matter if Yulian got caught in the process or not. Destroying Jin's forces took priority over keeping Yulian alive. How does one transfer the contract anyway? The fact that it's still alive and active after the Bluebird Islands incident is also unsettling. He must be doing something dreadful and sinister. I hope you can dispel some of my unsettling concerns. If I tell you everything I know, can you protect me? Yulian spoke decisively. He didn't ask Jean if he could protect him. He asked if Jean would directly protect him. Jean understood the difference in nuance in the words and nodded. If you give me information that's worth it, of course. There's a woman called the Seer. Kazan didn't know anything about that person. The Seer. She is Sir Joshua's right-hand woman. I've only seen her twice, but it seemed like she was behind almost every decision he makes. It was she who told him about Graham's tomb on the Bluebird Islands and that it can also be used to strengthen my powers. What kind of person is she? A monster who is in absolute servitude to Sir Joshua. A monster? Does that mean she's powerful? No, I don't know. I referred to her as a monster because she doesn't feel human. You said you killed Sir Joshua in the Bluebird Islands. You probably killed a copy of him created by that woman. Jean smiled satisfied. It was solid information obtained from the beginning of this interrogation, and the theory he had discussed with his companions had proven to be correct. But it was quite shocking to hear that Joshua had actually been a copy. Do you know how that woman creates copies of Joshua? I only know that it requires a large number of humans. What? It seemed like they used the condemned in Huffister. They sent them to the Seer, and he obtained a new body. He mainly used those bodies to handle people like me, to strengthen his potential contractors and suppress them in case of overload. This revealed the purpose of Joshua's unexpected visit to the Bluebird Islands. He had sent Julian there, but when he saw the lightning storm forming over the Bluebird Islands, he thought it was an overload, not a manifestation. He went to take care of it himself, and that's when he encountered Jean. That crazy bastard. He's been using copies of himself because he can't send the clan's knights when the contractors experience an overload. Jean brought his hand to his forehead as he shook his head. Condemned or not, using humans as ingredients to create copies of himself and the fact that Joshua did it without any remorse made Jean sick. Surely, that can't be the only purpose for which he used his copies. Do you know how many copies of himself he has? I don't know. But I do know that he once lost a copy while suppressing the water contractor in their overload. It wasn't just one copy. There could be multiple instances of him as well. The Seer truly deserved to be called a monster, just as Julian had described her. It seems we'll have to verify if this person called the Seer is even human. I'm sure she was the one who informed him about how the contract can be transferred. In reality, the Seer was gathering ingredients for the contract. But neither Jean nor Julian were aware of that. Jean pondered for a while and then looked at Julian with puzzled eyes. You were aware that Joshua would take away the contract from you if he failed to capture me. How come you never managed to escape from him? Was it because you were too afraid of him? Do you think it's possible to escape Joshua's reach within Huffister? I don't see why not. You're not just an ordinary person. You're a contractor. If you had sought help from the Zippel, they would have welcomed you with open arms. In that case, not even Joshua could have stopped you. Since Julian didn't officially belong to the Run Candles, Joshua had no justification to bring him back if he sided with the Zippels. Is your family held hostage? My dragon guardian is. I have no family left. They were all killed by Joshua, the entire village I lived in. And yet, you obeyed his orders without rebelling against him. Don't you have any pride? Any sense of revenge? However, Jean didn't reprimand him. He understood how far removed he lived from the emotion of fear as a successful Run Candle in his current life. Most people were unable to overcome their fears. But Jean knew very well that that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, considering the miserable life he had in the past. You must think I'm pathetic. That's why that woman, Beres, also interrogated me all the time. But Jean Runcandle, this information should be worth it. Keep your end of the deal. It's not very difficult to protect you. As long as you lead a quiet life here in Tychon without ever venturing out, you should be fine. But I don't think that's what you're saying. You're right. Please bring back my dragon guardian from Joshua. Without him, my miserable life means nothing. Jean shook his head without hesitation. I'll give you the opportunity. You'll be able to bring him back yourself someday. Chapter 224. News heard. News to find. 5. Of course. That's only if you wholeheartedly join my forces. Until then, you're a captive. We'll treat you humanely, so I hope you won't disappoint me. Jean continued. As he had said, Yulian was practically a prisoner he had obtained after defeating his enemy. Although Yulian had provided a lot of information, he had not yet joined Jin's forces. Yulian also understood well that he should be thankful for having his life spared for now. His request to rescue his dragon guardian was more of a declaration of his desire to side with Jean. Yulian never imagined that Joshua could fall. His family had been massacred, and the village he lived in was wiped out without a trace. But no one in Huffaster ever mentioned it, and no organization demanded the truth. It was because the Runcandles were behind it. To Yulian, Joshua was the successor to the Runcandle Patriarchate, one without any real competitors. That wasn't all. He made copies of himself through the seer and pursued divine contractors, easily controlling their dragons and confining them as well. Yulian was only 12 years old when he was forced to obey Joshua. To him, Joshua was a divine being he could never disobey, an indescribable source of fear. But Yulian saw his first ray of hope in Jean. Not only had he defeated his own manifestation of Paytel, but he was also a Runcandle who had managed to kill Joshua's copy. Perhaps he was someone who could help put an end to this terrifying and miserable servitude. I understand. Let's take some time to trust each other. Okay? Unlike Kazan, you lack motives or reasons to stay by my side. Elisa? Yes, Lord Jean. Please take good care of this companion until you feel confident that he can leave the basement. Understood. Jean couldn't release a man capable of causing mass destruction without any verification. Jean planned to keep Yulian confined in the basement to monitor him for a while. Oh, and one more thing. Let me know if you ever crave snacks again. Jean left the basement with Kazan. Immediately, his mind filled with thoughts. The copy was real. And there's also the seer. Kazan also seemed concerned. It seems you didn't know about the seer. I apologize. No need for apologies. From today on, you'll go to the basement every night to have dinner with Yulian. Try to find out what Yulian knows about Joshua's forces. Compare it with what you know and present the information to me in the form of charts. Joshua would know that Yulian was still alive because the captive dragon guardian he held would show no signs of change. Therefore, Jean had to make sure not to eliminate or provoke any of Joshua's forces mentioned by Yulian for some time because that would inform Joshua of his betrayal and cause him to kill the dragon guardian. Kazan understood his intentions and nodded. I'll make sure to handle it well, so that Yulian won't be seen as a traitor. All right, why don't you rest a bit until nightfall? Or you could go see Beriz. I'll listen to your stories and Beriz's when she's fully healed. Thank you, sir. Later, I'll discuss with Sir Kashmir to assign you a position. You'll likely be assigned to the 7-colored peacocks. No special favor will be shown to you, so make sure to pay attention during basic training. Lord Jean. Yes. If it ever happens that Beriz becomes unable to handle mana, I'll make sure to do anything to share her burden as well. Kazan and Beriz had lived their entire lives as tools and hounds for someone. They had the deep notion that their lives were over once they lost their usefulness. That's why Kazan was worried that Jean would get rid of Beriz. Kazan had already decided to become a tool for Jean. Of course, Jean didn't consider people as tools. So, are you asking me not to get rid of Beriz or to treat her as if she's worthless? If you allow me the audacity to ask, yes. If talks go well with the priests of Vankila, then we'll provide her with extra treatment. And even if not, we still have many uses for her, so don't worry. In any case, come to Sir Kashmir's office tomorrow at noon. Gilly will assign you a room. Jean turned around to address his other companions. Kazan knelt down on the floor and gave a deep bow in Jin's direction. Quicantle was passing by the hallway. He grabbed Kazan by the shoulder and lifted him up. What are you doing in the middle of the hallway? At this rate, you might start building altars in his name. This made Jean smile awkwardly. He tried to pretend he hadn't noticed Kazan's bow. Then, Kazan headed to Beriz's room with an uncomfortable air. Did you find out anything? Quicantle asked Jean. Yes. Let me tell you along with the others. They headed to Kashmir's office. Everyone was already gathered there. Jean informed them of what he had learned from Yulian. Kashmir, Quicantle, and Latrie couldn't hide their surprise. Witchcraft that uses humans to create copies of humans? How terrifying. I mean, it's not like humans are cookie dough. Latrie shrugged. Quicantle shook his head. Anyway, what about your older brother? He's supposed to be a run candle, but he hires a sorcerer to try to curse you. And now, a copy? And this person called the seer even has the power to force the contract too, right? God, that gives me chills. I've been thinking about this for a while, but it's so cunning. I can't believe he shares your lineage, Lord Jean. As Enya had nearly become a sacrifice for the demon god stone, the phrase of forcing a contract itself sent shivers down her spine. And what about you, dragons? Do you have any idea what it could be? A demon. I think it's a demon. Quicantle and Latrie responded at the same time. If it's a demon with powers like those of a demon king, it's very possible. Apart from the contract part, of course. But since the Zippel and Kinselo tried to transfer contracts with the demon godstone, demons might also have a form. Demons, huh? The battle for the Holy Kingdom. In the only battle in history where the Run Candles and the Zippel fought together, the demons were defeated and destroyed without a chance of recovery. Thanks to that, they were too focused on rebuilding their world to intervene in the human world. Or the witch Hilurim. I suppose anything would be possible if it were her. Whether it's making copies of a person or transferring contracts, I think it would undoubtedly be possible for her. Whether it's a demon or Hilurim, we have to find out how they got involved with Joshua and what their purpose is. But Jean paused. Being realistic, that would be difficult. It's also too risky to introduce the peacocks for that. In fact, I'm starting to think that their reach might extend beyond Joshua and actually involve the clan. That's certainly possible, Lord Jean. If such a figure is by Joshua's side, I doubt that the major figures within the Runcandle clan are completely oblivious to it. They all nodded. The Runcandles wouldn't be competing for world domination against the Zippel if they weren't at least equally cunning. Either the Runcandle clan is turning a blind eye to Joshua's alliance with the seer, or they're giving it their full support. I suppose that will be the most crucial point. Kashmir spoke with a heavy voice. In the case of the latter, I wonder what Timar would think of his descendants. I don't think we should address this issue before I become the flag-bearer. They could face a reaction they couldn't bear. He couldn't ask Siren either. Although he had obtained a witness, it wasn't enough. If he ever asked for help in the succession war, it was unknown how Siren would treat him afterward. Just like the Kinselo and the Zippel have a tremendous number of hidden forces, I suppose my clan might also have some. Is that why Mother has been giving her full support to Joshua? Because she excels in those covert moves. Jean delved into various secrets of the major factions as a reserve flag-bearer. The Zippel used all sorts of dirty tricks to become the sole deities of the world, and the Kinselo were no different. Vermont hadn't directly clashed with Jean yet, but he maintained a triangular relationship with the Zippel and Kinselo. It was unlikely that the Runcandle clan was the only major faction doing nothing. Suddenly, Jean remembered the words Joshua had spoken on the Bluebird Islands. Not at all. If I had wanted to, I could have always surpassed that older sister of yours. But, dear younger brother, do you have any idea of the kind of things lurking in the world above? In the world you haven't experienced yet. Why do you think the Runcandles never surpassed the Zippel, despite our father? Why do you think Father has never abandoned me despite his disappointments? Setting aside his own dissatisfaction, it's because he knows that I am the one most protected against our enemies, of all our siblings in the Garden of Swords. In reality, the Zippel and the Kinselo wanted the same thing, to become the sole owners of the world. If I can figure it out myself, then the clan definitely knows it too. Did Joshua mean that he is the one most protected against the Kinselo and the Zippel? If the Runcandles weren't against the existence of the seer, it was probably because she was on their side. Or is there something I don't know? After thinking for a while, Jean looked at his companions with determination. I don't think I can afford to enjoy the 5 years my father has given me. I must plan to return to the clan earlier. It had been almost 3 years since he became a reserve flag-bearer. But what he could find out as a reserve flag-bearer had a limit, especially if the information was related to the run candles. When do you plan to return? Early 1799 seems fine to me. As we're now in October 1797, that would be a little over a year from now. I'll sort out the things I'll need to obtain by then and start building a reputation that the clan can accept. Then we'll openly investigate that woman called the seer, with my right as the flag-bearer. Jin's powers were already more than enough to be accepted as a run-candle flag-bearer. Besides, he could always build the reputation necessary with the name he chose himself. But he needed to make further preparations before returning. Preparations that would allow him to fight against Joshua's foundations. If only that stupid Murakan could regain at least half of his former powers before your return. Then I wouldn't worry so much about sending you, Quickhantle said. He left with a firm determination to find his sister, so I'm sure he'll return with some changes, right? Murakan had said that it would take him about 2 months to find his sister, but just a month later, Jean and his companions heard news presumed to be related to Murakan. Chapter 225. Murakan's Benefactor 1. Before departing, Murakan left a letter and a sheet of paper outlining his approximate travel route for Gili. The paper contained a list of marked areas where his companions could find him in case of trouble during his journey. Every 3 days, 7 Colors Group checked Murakan's marks, and on November 20th, 1797, they heard news of a battle between a dragon and a monster near the Krashi Mountains, in a city called Santel. The Krashi Mountains were one of the areas where Murakan had left his mark. Young Master, something strange has happened. Right after we confirmed Murakan's mark in the Krashi Mountains, there was a big fight between a fire dragon and a monster in Santel. But the monster was all black and winged, almost dragon-like. So you think the monster that fought the fire dragon could be Murakan? That's right. Why? Because the battle happened immediately after he left his mark. That, and the city of Santel is in chaos. Even though our 7 Colors Group members tried to enter to gather more information, the entire city is locked down and we couldn't get in. The city has turned into a sea of fire, and there isn't a single news article about it. That was indeed strange. Although the area around the Krashi Mountains was remote, it would be normal for an article to be published immediately if a battle had taken place that was severe enough to affect a nearby city. 7 Colors Group was able to obtain information from locals before the city was completely blocked off. But not a single external media outlet covered the incident. We barely got the information that the monster resembled a dragon. If we were just 2 hours late, we wouldn't have met the locals. I'm sure it's Murakan. Media control is a privilege of major powers. And a fire dragon at that. It didn't feel good. Fire dragon and media control. Young Master, it looks like Zipful's side is involved. If there is a fire dragon that works with Zipful, wouldn't it be Cadden, the guardian dragon of Keliark? Enya looked at Jean worriedly. Ever since Jet started reporting, a bad feeling enveloped the companions. Jet. Yes, ma'am. Quinkcantle. Do you have more information about the fire dragon that attacked the city? Its appearance or its combat power at the time of the battle? All we know is that it was significantly larger than other dragons. Sigh. Quinkcantle sighed and put her hand on her forehead. It must be Cadden. Jean, it seems like he was the one who attacked. We should not have let Murakan go alone. From the moment he first came to Beemont, Zipful was clearly targeting him. Quinkcantle suddenly stood up with anxious clearly visible in her eyes. Cadden, the king of the fire dragons, was a tricky opponent even when Murakan was in his prime. Now, having lost his old power, he was so strong that Murakan couldn't even compete with him. Quinkcantle was someone who knew better than anyone else that Murakan could never handle Cadden. That's why she became extremely anxious as soon as she was sure. Calm down, Quinkcantle. Certain that Murakan is not dead. I'm his contractee and I didn't feel anything. Darn it. If Cadden overpowered Murakan, it's only natural that he didn't kill him. Because if he dies, we don't know what will happen to the next contractor of Sodaret, or who it will be. He probably tore his wings and imprisoned him, or he might have been drugged up. Besides, they want the contract of Sodaret, so they will try to find you, the contractor. The words spat out by Andre, who had a duel with Jean, flashed through Jin's mind. I commend your surprise attack. But you and your god will become the most important ingredients of the demon's stone. The most important ingredient of the demon's stone. This sentence revealed how much Zipfel valued the power of Solderet. Andre died that day with Violetta, but there were many more moments when Zipfel could have learned that the Black Dragon is active. The day he became a preliminary rider and left the Garden of Swords on Murican, the day he went to Beemont to find Quinkcantle, the day he killed the Graveyard Giant, or the Cologne Ruins, etc. Even if it wasn't in the Lutero Magic Federation, considering that Zipfel's informants are everywhere in the world, they were news items that could easily be passed on. As Quinkcantle said, maybe they've been looking for Murican and me from the beginning. Of course, it was the result of Murican insisting that he had to move alone to meet Misha. Anyway, regret did not help in finding Murican. What was needed now was accurate judgment and quick action. But Master, there's one more strange thing. What is it? Isn't Vankella a neutral country? While the rest of us determined that Zipfel was controlling the media, it was the Knights of Vankella who were blocking the city. Santel belonged to the Shul Kingdom, so it was not the territory of Vankella. Battle was fought by Cadden and Murican, media control is done by Zipfel, and the city blockade is being handled by the Knights? Yes, the Shul Kingdom itself isn't doing anything. That was definitely strange. It was common for the Holy Kingdom of Vankella to dispatch knights and healers to disaster-stricken areas of various countries for city restoration and relief of the people, but it was rare for them to block an area. That was the responsibility of the military in the area. If they didn't have enough military power, it was usually taken care of by whoever was controlling the media. So Jean and his companions naturally thought that Zipfel was in control. Moreover, the attitude of the knights who drove out the Seven Colors group members and other reporters who happened to smell something and ran was blatantly rude. As if dealing with pagans. So you're saying that the Holy Kingdom is aiding Zipfel? Vankella was a country that had never taken sides with anyone throughout history. It maintained neutrality even in Jin's previous life. I'm not sure, but for now, I and the other members think that way. There was a moment of silence. Without entering Santel directly, there was no clear information to find out. Gilly placed her hand on Jin's shoulder and looked into his eyes. Young master, he's not one to be easily defeated. Don't worry too much, and it would be best to go see for yourself. It might not be Murican, but a real winged monster. Although she said this, Gilly's hand on Jin's shoulder was trembling. She was desperately suppressing her emotions so as not to upset Jean further. To Jean and Gilly, Murican was more than just a friend, he was family. When something bad happens to someone like him, they'd rather it be them instead. Sir Kashmir, does Seven Colors Group have a line established with Vankella? There are a few priests that Bran Pirani, and I personally know. TL, who was Bran again? Then sir, could you check with Vankella? What happened in Santel? Why the Holy Kingdom is involved in Zipfel's business? Understood. It was Jean, Quinkcantle, and Kazan who went directly to Santel. Since there was no direct portal to Santel, they had to ride Shuri from the Shul Kingdom, which took a whole day. Santel, which they saw firsthand, was under stricter control than they had expected. And it was still engulfed in blood-red flames. I'm sure that's Cadden's flame. There's no other fire dragon that can use such intense fire. Quinkcantle stood on the cliff overlooking the city and gritted her teeth. They could also see the sights of mages and holy knights fighting the flames inside the city. The civilians were all gathered in certain areas where the flames were contained. It was a strange sight. Vankella always prioritized the lives of the people in situations like disasters and wars. Naturally, since the city was still burning, it was right to first evacuate the people. However, the holy knights in plate armor were completely blocking the entrance as if they were dealing with heretics. They had something to hide, so they were blocking it. It was highly likely that there was information that should not be leaked, and there were too many witnesses. It seems like Cadden has left the city. If he was still here, mages and holy knights would have been battling or protecting the civilians instead of putting out the fire. Let's enter the city now. Santel was a city that was situated on a plain. It wasn't easy to approach, avoiding the eyes of the guards and holy knights, But fortunately, there were still some reporters nearby waiting for a chance to enter. As soon as the group descended the cliff, they mixed with them and approached the city. That should have been enough to get inside the city. The place they chose to penetrate was the side gate on the left of the city. The atmosphere was even more severe than the central gate, and even the reporters did not stake out there. Step back. Take off your hood and identify yourself. If you take 2 more steps, I'll cut you down. As soon as the holy knights blocking the side gate saw the group, they spoke in low voices. In fact, they seemed to have driven away a few reporters before the group arrived, as there were dried bloodstains. On the dirt ground, the scales drawn on the plate armor indicated their position as holy knights. They were second-class knights of the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine, under the Inquisition, infamous within the Holy Kingdom. They were not the kind of people to be stationed in such a quiet city or to block it. Holy Knights of the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine, both Zipful and the Holy Kingdom. It's clear that they're taking this matter very seriously. But this time it could be a matter of life and death for a family member. As a result, no complicated move was planned while a justification was crafted. It wasn't time for actions that required time, such as deceiving or bribing. Kazan. Sryung dash. When Jean gave a signal, Kazan flashed his eyes and drew his dagger. A pre-manufactured anesthetic poison was applied to the blade. Quiet. In an instant, the Holy Knights couldn't finish their words. Kazan and Quinkcantle, who rushed at the same time, suppressed them with a single blow. Kazan accurately stabbed the seams of the plate armor with his dagger to anesthetize the opponent, and Quinkcantle forcefully opened the helm and fed the poison that Kazan gave him. The Holy Knights were instantly paralyzed while standing. While Quinkcantle and Kazan propped up the Holy Knights against the wall, Jean swung his sword through the gap in the door and cut the bolt inside. In 3 minutes at the earliest and 10 minutes at the latest, the fact that the side gate was open would be known. That was enough. Within that time, they needed to meet a local, find out if the appearance of the monster exactly matched Mirakin, if he used Shadow Chi, Aura, and how the battle with Kadin ended. Giik dash. However, the moment the side gate opened, the group faced 2 new Holy Knights. It just happened to be the time for a shift change. Chapter 226. Mirakin's Benefactor, 2. It was fortunate that there were only 2 of them. All they had to do was suppress them in the same way. With a swift movement, Quinkcantle's fist struck the face of the knight who reflexively drew his sword. The helmet dented, blood splattered, and the knight fell unconscious. Kazan, unfazed, stabbed at the seams of the armor, paralyzing his opponent. "We've just arrived and you've already taken down 4 knights," Jean commented as he hid the fallen knights in a drain. They looked like corpses but weren't dead. Fortunately, there was not a single person inside the side gate. The city center had already been sealed off, preventing civilians from leaving. The 3 of them moved silently. They had to enter the city and check on Mirakin as soon as possible. Once they entered the city, they noticed quite a few patrolling knights. There were no Shul Kingdom forces, as Jet reported. Instead, the city was filled with extreme and authoritative figures like the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine. Jean and his group were able to infiltrate the city center undetected, thanks to their superior skills and the noisy and bustling streets. The buildings were burning and collapsing from the flames left by Kadin. The streets were filled with screams and cries. People who had lost family and relatives in the battle were wailing and collapsing everywhere. There were also bodies that had not yet been cleaned up. Knights with indifferent eyes concealed by helmets were throwing corpses onto wagons. Most, if not all, of the corpses were those who had died from fire. The bodies were burnt black, making it impossible to identify them. There were no signs of spiritual power being used yet. "This is horrifying," said Jean. "Dragons like Kadin don't care about humans, unless you are a special human. To them, humans are no different from bugs. Most dragons view humans as inferior beings, but fire dragons are especially so. But can we say that these corpses have nothing to do with Mirakin?" As Jean pondered this, Quinkcantle added, "At least he's not the type to slaughter humans indiscriminately for his own purpose." Jean responded with an awkward smile. The further they ventured into the city, the more bodies they found. Some were piled up like mountains, with priests singing requiems around them. There were easily at least 5,000 dead. This was a devastating loss for a city the size of Santel. It was likely that more than half of the city's residents had died. But it wasn't just corpses. A smaller number of injured people were constantly groaning and screaming. The healers, known as the Saints of Vankella, were sweating as they attended to them. However, not all the saints were focused on healing. This was what made the group feel strange. "Sir, isn't the atmosphere in the city a bit weird?" asked one of the group members. Jean nodded quietly. Quinkcantle was also looking at the saints, not those performing healing magic, but those preaching. Right now, the fire dragon is still fighting monsters on the plains outside the city. But good and gentle people, the messengers of heaven have come, so do not fear or despair. The hateful monster that killed our parents, siblings, children, will soon be killed by the fire dragon. Let us all pray together. May the gods watch over the fire dragon. The claim that a battle was still ongoing on the plains outside the city was clearly a lie. Jean and his companions had just passed through there to enter the city. Outside, there were only a few reporters and the knights blocking them. However, the civilians sitting in front of the saint seemed to believe his words. "Let us pray. Amen." Some were even moved by the saint's absurd agitation and fell to their knees. On one side, healing was taking place. On the other, agitation was being stirred among the less injured, and the city was tightly sealed off. Those from Vankella were blatantly manipulating the situation. But it wasn't that the civilians were fools who were deceived by the saints' agitation. In the midst of the shock and grief of losing their families, they were being brainwashed by the saints' unique persuasion magic. The saints claimed it was divine power, but most mages, including Jean, knew it was a type of mana. Persuasion magic, similar to old mental magic, was often used for preaching and evangelism. The faint yellow light in the saint's eyes was proof that persuasion magic was being used. Through the power of prayer, both the dead and the living are bound together. We are never alone. Those who have fulfilled their mission will find peace. Persuasion magic was useless against those with strong mental power, but it could easily deceive civilians who were in shock. The current Holy King must have strictly prohibited the use of persuasion magic by the saints, but they're all using it. The current Holy King, Micklin, had even announced that any saint using persuasion magic would be classified as a heretic. It had continued to be used out of convenience and tradition, but persuasion magic clearly went against the doctrine and what the Holy Kingdom pursued. They're trying to pin the massacre committed by Cadden on the monster. If Murican is the monster, I don't think he's been caught by Cadden yet. I think so too, Quinkcantle. If he had been caught, there would be no need for this commotion. The monster presumed to be Murican had escaped, and Cadden, in his haste to chase him, had not extinguished the flames spread throughout the city. Jean and Quinkcantle simultaneously deduced the same situation. If he had been caught, Cadden could have extinguished the flames spread throughout the city and even glorified the name of Zipfel by killing the monster. We need to figure out why they're helping Zipfel by breaking the orders of the Holy King, Jean mused. Judging from the circumstances that had surfaced so far, Vankella was no longer a neutral country. They were aiding Zipfel even at the cost of using forbidden mind control techniques, known as persuasion magic. This couldn't have happened without the permission at the national level. However, finding Murican was more urgent than pondering this issue right now. Let's try to talk to the civilians when we get a chance. We just need to confirm whether the demon is indeed Murican before we leave. It wasn't easy to find an opportunity to interact with the civilians. There was no point in conversing with civilians who were caught up in the agitation, and there was a high chance they would report them to the saints if they found them suspicious. Just as they were about to move again, a holy knight found one of the saints standing in front of their group. He whispered something to the saint and quickly moved somewhere else. Good and gentle citizens, we've just received a report. A cunning group has infiltrated the city. If you see anyone suspicious, please immediately find our messengers. the movements of the patrolling Holy Knights changed too. Up until now, they only looked for civilians who had strayed from the main roads, but now they started checking alleys and gaps between buildings. They quickly left their spot and started looking for a civilian who could converse with them again. But there were Holy Knights, saints, or mages extinguishing fires everywhere. There weren't any civilians separated from them. The biggest problem was that the number of Holy Knights stationed in Santel greatly exceeded their expectations. Damn! The streets are full of Holy Knights. How many are there? If this continues, it'll soon be impossible to hide. Jean. It's gotten tiresome. I expected this since we broke through the side gate. Creak. Thud. Creak. They heard the sound of all the double lock mechanisms in every gate tightly closing from afar. The Holy Knights on the street started running around shouting something, and the saints led the civilians somewhere and disappeared. Over here! A Holy Knight who encountered the group as they passed an alley shouted. Even though the flames coloring the city and the chaotic atmosphere had hidden their group until now, their senses were also duller than usual due to the situation. Even though Jean had his mind's eye activated, he couldn't accurately sense the energy of hundreds of people moving nearby in this chaos. Therefore, they couldn't change directions before encountering a Holy Knight at the corner of an alley. Drop your weapons and kneel. If there were 50 Holy Knights, or if there were a few high-ranking knights mixed in, the group would have had to fight carefully. But just 5 knights from the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine couldn't do anything against their group. As Quinkcantle and Kazan were about to take 2 each and suppress them, Jean equipped Sigmund. Crack dash! Before the 5 Holy Knights could attack Jean, he cast a lightning bolt. Since their location had already been exposed by the horn and flare, it was better to quickly finish them off with a lightning bolt and move on. He cast 10 lightning bolts in 5 seconds and suppressed 4 of them. Of course, Jean intended to suppress all 5. The one who wasn't hit by the lightning bolt, despite experiencing the king's sword for the first time, stepped back calmly. Even by Jin's standards, he was quite skilled. However, for some reason, that Holy Knight didn't draw his sword. Even when he first saw Jin's group, he didn't take any proper action even when the other 4 immediately drew their swords and shouted. Just as Quinkcantle and Kazan were about to rush at that Holy Knight together. Wait! Wait a minute! Suddenly, the Holy Knight raised both his arms. It was an unbelievable behavior for a Knight of the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine, an extreme group within Vankella. What? I'm Lonnie Salome, a second-class Knight of the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine. You guys don't seem like heretics to me. What? You're not heretics, right? Please answer. An unexpected question. But the Knight's eyes inside his helmet were so earnest that Jean simply nodded. I never draw my sword against those who aren't heretics. And you guys, you're related to the Black Dragon who fought against that crazy fire dragon, right? Jin's eyes widened. The Knight who introduced herself as Lonnie used the term Black Dragon instead of monster. Plus, he called Cadden a crazy fire dragon, showing a strong enmity towards him. Clang, clang, clang dash. They heard the sound of other Holy Knights running from a distant alley. They would arrive at the alley where they were standing in a few seconds. Follow me for now. If you're caught by my colleagues, you won't be able to survive. Chapter 227. Murikin's Benefactor, 3. What an interesting joke. Come this way. Lonnie pointed to a gap in the alley. It was the path she and the other knights had used to follow the group. The party passed her and headed there first. As soon as Kuzan's toes disappeared into the gap, about 20 knights flooded the alley. Lonnie Salome? Where are they? The Captain Knight glared at the knights fallen next to Lonnie. Lonnie still hadn't drawn her sword, and the captain seemed very displeased. The other knights also sighed or clicked their tongues at her. Everyone knew Lonnie's principle of never attacking anyone who wasn't a heretic. And from Lonnie's point of view, heretics were those who were clearly judged as such in the final trial presided over by Holy King Miklin, and those who proclaimed themselves heretics and practiced black magic. I'm sorry, we lost them. It seems they are heading towards Area 1. We should chase. Humph. Those rats are trapped anyway. They will soon be caught. But Lonnie Salome, you didn't even draw your sword when you saw your colleagues fall. Can you still call yourself a knight of the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine? With a stiff expression, Lonnie ground her teeth so that the captain could hear. If I have to receive punishment, I will accept it later. For now, it would be better if you chase the intruders. You disappoint me every time. How long do you think he can protect you? Even in front of a heretic? Tisk. Just chase them. And how can the 5 captains be so sure they're heretics? Aren't they just intruders yet? Furious, Lonnie shouted. The captain glared at her for a while, then shook his head with a sigh. Unit 3, send Lonnie's team members to the Saints and regroup in Area 1. And Knight Lonnie Salome, you're on probation as of now. Return to the barracks, surrender your weapons and armor, and wait. If you defy this, I can't guarantee what will happen next. Do you understand? The knights left the alley, leaving behind the knights of Unit 3. The knights of Unit 3 who were taking care of her fallen team members were constantly berating her. I wish my father was like yours, disobeying orders and talking back to the captain, and all you get is probation. Do you know? You seem more of a heretic than a heretic. Please request a position change when you get back, and get out of here. Stop tarnishing the Dawn Guardians. Once they left, only Lonnie remained in the alley, and Jin's party had been listening to their conversation from the side gap. Lonnie Salome sounded familiar, and I remember now. She's the adopted daughter of Holy King Miklin. In his previous life, he had read an article or two about her in the newsletter. Despite being the daughter of the Holy King, she lived a debauched life, soaked in alcohol every day, and was a character that even the citizens of the Holy Kingdom pointed fingers at. The article was very small in the corner of the page, but she was memorable because of her status as the daughter of the Holy King. Soon, Lonnie looked around and entered the gap where the party was. We've passed the crisis for now. Let's move to a safe place and have a chat. But before that, wait a minute. Lonnie Salome, you seem to want to help us. But why? And how did you know we were related to the Black Dragon? When Jean asked while looking at her, Lonnie stood silent for a few seconds, but it seemed like countless thoughts were passing through her mind. I am a knight belonging to the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine. You said that earlier too. But before being a knight, I am a citizen of the Holy Kingdom of Vankella, a human, and a daughter who conveys the words of our infinitely merciful Lord Ielra. Spelling of Ielra? She blurted out an introduction that didn't fit the situation, but it was filled with strong determination and resolve, so they couldn't ignore it as nonsense. The duty of someone like me is not to blind people's eyes, disguise evil as good, and become disgusting by colluding with power. Cadden the Fire Dragon, he is the evil we should be pursuing. The Black Dragon, on the other hand, tried to prevent him from burning down the city. Her tightly clenched fists trembled. Does this explain why I'm helping you? He tried to prevent him from burning down the city? Tell me more, knight. Where is he? Quinkental grabbed Lonnie's shoulder and asked. Please follow me first, we don't have much time. The place Lonnie led them to was a bustling street. But more than half of the buildings had melted, and Cadden's residual fire was still there, continuously spewing toxic smoke, making it an irrecoverable downtown. Even the saints and magicians had given up on extinguishing the fire here, and it was not designated as a controlled area because the toxicity was too strong. Wait a moment. I'll put up a holy shield. We're all right, it's just her. The toxicity here is severe. It doesn't matter. Let's hurry up and go. Understood. Lonnie put a shield around herself and Quincantle. We should be safe for at least 30 minutes here. Where's the Black Dragon? He's here. He can't withstand this level of toxicity. I've protected him with my holy power, so don't worry. But before you see him, let me ask you one thing. Are you Jean Runkendal? Suddenly, Jin's name came up, and Kazan and Quincantle's eyes widened. Jean nodded without fluster. It seems he told you. Yes, Murican asked for a favor. He said Jean Runkendal would soon come looking for him and asked me to protect him until then. Please show me a mark that can prove you are Jean Runkendal. From my point of view, you could be another servant of Cadden. There was no immediate object that could serve as proof of identity. Though Bradamante was Runkindle's sword, it was only identifiable by those who were from the clan or were the warriors of Hufster. You don't have it? Hey, let's stop testing the gentleman. If we were servants of the fire dragon, why would we infiltrate so complicatedly? Kazan pointed a dagger at her neck and spoke in a low voice. Do you think I will fear your threats? If I did, I wouldn't have brought you here. And if you harm me, know that Murikin will surely die. Sheath your blade, Kazan. Kazan immediately bowed his head and stepped back. Lonnie had a stubborn look in her eyes. She seemed determined not to show Murikin unless Jean could prove his identity. I have no objection. Instead, let this reveal that Murikin is my guardian dragon. Jean gathered spirit energy in his palm and looked at Lonnie. Spirit energy, the power of the Soderette. It's up to you to figure out if I am Jean Runkindle or not, but I am the only contractor of the shadow. Do I need to show any more evidence? Now, was not the time to hide the fact that he was a contractor. No, that's enough. Is he safe? Honestly, he's not safe. He's been badly injured. And let's see him for now. Jean suppressed his pounding heart and spoke. It was clearly visible that he wanted to hurry. It felt like molten iron was boiling in his chest. All kinds of emotions mixed together, almost blinding him. Fire Dragon Cadden. I will make sure you experience a terrible end. Creak. Lonnie tore off the plank under her feet. The ash that was covering the plank flew up in a clump, and a pumpkin-colored light flowed out from between them, the same color as the light covering Lonnie's body. It was holy power. It was like a shield protecting the black cat. Wrapped around Murikin, the holy power glowed. Murikin, the representative of Soderette, his friend, the last descendant of the first existence created from the shadow, Jin's only guardian dragon. It was him. Lonnie had been hiding him transformed into a cat in this poison-filled building all along. It was something she couldn't have done without her outstanding holy power and faith. As Jean carefully held Murikin in his arms, tears welled up in Quincantle's eyes. Kazan also breathed a sigh of relief and rubbed his chest. I'll explain what happened. Lonnie started explaining the situation when she rescued Murikin. She and the knights were sent to Santel on the orders of the regents. They were ordered to assist the fire dragon Cadden, surround the monster, and purify the city of Santel, which was in danger of becoming a city of heretics. But what Lonnie saw here was neither a monster nor a heretic. The commoners dying from the merciless breath of the fire dragon, and for some reason, the black dragon preventing the city from collapsing. Among the dispatched knights, it was only Lonnie who felt that something was wrong. Under the disguise of purification, the saints stirred up the commoners and the knights blocked the city. Actually, it's Cadden who's killing the commoners, and it didn't take 2 hours for all that slaughter to be blamed on Lord Murikin. When Lonnie arrived, the battle between Cadden and Murikin was nearing its end. Cadden had burned the entire city just to make it impossible for Murikin to escape. On the other hand, Murikin was cornered, trying to prevent damage to the commoners and losing energy. In the end, Murikin managed to escape. Or it seemed like he did. He broke through Cadden's fire barrier and flew into the sky. But it seems he didn't have the strength to go far. Cadden immediately started chasing him, and Murikin. It seemed like he had taken a gamble. The moment Cadden broke his barrier and started flying, Murikin re-entered the city. Out of sight, out of mind. Murikin, who had taken a position in the sky above Santel again inside the fire barrier, fell to the ground and transformed into a human. Cadden didn't notice because he was chasing Murikin's shadow, created with spirit energy in the sky. It was a miracle that Lonnie alone clearly saw that sight. Lonnie was immediately able to rescue him. But the problem was the other knights who had been dispatched to Santel. He would be in a dangerous situation if he wasn't treated immediately. But I couldn't take him to the saints as a disaster victim. His transformation was unstable and black scales were sprouting all over his body. Lonnie desperately tried to save the black dragon with holy magic, but it was not enough. And for some reason, while Murikin was losing consciousness, He barely left a message to the human trying to treat him, Lonnie. He said Jean Runkendall would come looking for him. As soon as he finished speaking, he fell unconscious, transformed into this form. I used my holy power to hide Lord Murakan here. Jean, this isn't a transformation. He was forcibly transformed. Let's talk about the details later. Let's get out of here first. I will show you the best route to escape. Please go that way. Lonnie Salome, I swear on the honor of Soderette and Runkendall, I will repay this debt. As soon as your punishment is over, I will go to the Holy Kingdom. Chapter 228. The Power of the Black Dragon 1. The First Magic Tower of Zipfel. The top floor of this place, commonly known as the Tower of Stories, was where Keliark spent most of his time these days. Murakan, I was looking for Misha, but I ran into an even bigger fish. Keliark spoke, tapping a crystal ball with his fingertips. Cadden, who was sitting in front of him, had transformed into a human and was frowning heavily. So what are you going to do, damn it? I didn't think you'd let him slip away right in front of your eyes. It was a golden opportunity that doesn't come twice in a lifetime. It's been a while since I've seen you regret something this much. It's not just regret. I can't forgive myself. If I had caught Murakan, I would have definitely been able to bring out his contractor. The contractor of Soderette. The most important ingredient of the demon stone they were working to restore. Keliark and the brains of Zipfel had been aware since 1795 that there was a possibility that the contractor of Soldlet was active. It was the year when Jean started his life as a preliminary rider before he met Andre Zipfel. Around that time, Cadden heard from Beemant's Earth Dragons Rabus and Unteal that they had directly met Murakan. However, Keliark and Cadden speculated that if a dragon had killed Andre Zipfel and Violetta, it was most likely Misha. Even if Murakan had woken up, they judged that he would be helpless against Andre and Violetta in his weakened state. Well, that's that. Since it's proven that the Beemant Earth Dragons weren't talking nonsense, let's take our time to seize the opportunity again. Anyway, you said he had no strength like before. Strength like before. Naturally, Keliark had never experienced Murakan's heyday firsthand. He only heard about it through documents and the testimonies of other dragons. On the other hand, Cadden knew very well about the formidable power of Murakan in those days. You never know. He might regain his former strength. You mean it's possible to regenerate a dragon's heart? Without the demon stone? I haven't seen such a case yet, but the black dragon is a bit different from ordinary dragons. There's a high possibility that him being around Santel was part of his efforts to regain his strength. Keliark's eyes lit up with interest. Whether it was possible to regenerate a dragon's heart or not, he found it more curious that Cadden was reacting like this. It makes me want to fight Murakan at his prime if you talk about it so much. It wouldn't be bad if he regained his strength and reappeared. Don't say such horrible things. Anyway, I'm more worried about the Holy King. He used the Dawn Guardians without saying a word, so he'll probably cause a fuss again soon. That friend, I feel like dying every time I meet him. He's so strong-willed, and he hates me too much. What should I do about this? Keliark trembled as he held his forehead. Then, after a while, he exaggerated his troubled mind with his body language and then smiled. Why don't I just kill him? That friend, he's lived long enough. If he dies, he's more likely to go to heaven than hell, so it won't be entirely bad for Micklin. Cadden shook his head at Keliark. Anyway, you're crazy. Haha. Did I go too far? Thanks to Lonnie showing them the way, the group was able to escape from Santel without difficulty. There were about 6 battles with the Dawn Guardians along the way, and a chase after they escaped the city. The group managed to fend them off and get to the teleport gate of the Shul Empire before the control order fell. Now that their destination was Tychon, they took a detour to prevent the Dawn Guardians from guessing this, and if they returned, they would have achieved their initial goal. However, Jean and his companions couldn't help but have dark expressions. Nio! In Jin's arms, Murakan let out a weak cry. His tiny body was hot as a fireball. Despite being transformed into a cat, there were still injuries inflicted by Cadden. Forced transformation. Currently, Murikin wasn't transformed by his own will, unlike usual. He had received a fatal blow and underwent an unconscious transformation into the most suitable form for survival. This forced transformation was a phenomenon that only particularly strong beings among dragons rarely experienced. It's a great relief that he still has this kind of defense mechanism, even though he lost his old power. It was certainly fortunate that he had escaped from the crisis of being caught by Cadden and survived. The problem is that he's now fallen to the state of an ordinary cat. Jean, you need to give him some more water. As Lonnie said, it seems like his fever is slowly coming down. When a dragon transforms into a creature other than a human, there are several fatal restrictions, and the most serious one is exactly the current situation. If they miss the time to return, dragons cannot return to their original form by themselves. No matter what they transform into, they fall into that creature and lose their identity as a dragon. Nya dash. When Jean offered water in his palm, Murakin licked it. There was no way to turn Murakin back to normal for now. It was because of his uniqueness as a black dragon. Other dragons, except for the black dragon, could return to their original form with the help of any dragon when they missed the time to return. However, a black dragon needed the help of another dragon with the same attribute. Since there are only 2 active black dragons, there was only one thing the group could do. Find Misha, the sister who Murikin had gone to find. We've never had a day as frustrating as today, knowing that this guy is a black dragon. As soon as we get back, let's check the travel routes that Murikin had set up again and start searching mainly those places. Lord, don't worry too much. As long as he's alive, we'll soon find a solution. I'm surprised you're capable of saying such things, Kazan. Just as Kazan said, he's alive and we know how to return him back to normal. Let's get going. The group twisted their route and returned to Taiken by early the next morning. They wanted to return faster due to Murikin's poor condition, but if they were caught, it wouldn't be the Knights of Dawn, but Cadden and Zipfel's magicians who could possibly come to Taiken. Fortunately, Murikin's fever had subsided overnight. He was still weakly crying, though. My lord, you're back. It seems that the beast of Santel was indeed Murikin. Why does Murikin look a little unwell? Did he get a bit roughed up by that fire dragon? Tell everyone to gather in the office. Call all the healers and animal handlers in the mansion, too. Animal handlers? Hurry. Understood. I'll call on the healers right away. But my lord, your colleagues may find it difficult to go to the office right away. I think it would be better for you to go to the reception room. Why? What happened? Jet nodded as if to confirm. Then, as if worried that someone else might hear, he looked around once before whispering. Well, isn't there a sister of Murikin? Named Misha. Is there news about Misha? Why is Misha here? When Jean and Quinkcantle both leaned forward to ask, Jet almost stumbled backward. Oh dear, please don't say that. She's really a bully. She's definitely Murikin's sister. She suddenly came to the mansion about 5 minutes ago and started being violent immediately. What? Jean and Quinkcantle instinctively looked at each other. It seems that Beres saw her first. Somehow, she suddenly appeared in the middle of the mansion's reception room. So Beres was surprised and said, Who are you, a thief? And then, what happened to Beres? This time, Kazan leaned towards Jet. Ah man, you'll scare me to death. Well, don't be too surprised and listen calmly. Beres's jaw twisted a bit from her punch. The healers are now fixing it, so there's no problem. Kazan ran like mad, almost tripping. It seems like he's in trouble. I think he will suffer the same fate as well. Jean and Quinkcantle began to run towards the reception room. Oh my lord, let's go together. Be careful. Why is Misha here and how did she find this place? Moreover, she's causing chaos. Does she have ill intentions towards us here in Taiken? Will she help revert Murikin? What if she can't or doesn't want to? Various questions flashed through their minds as they ran. A moment later, what Jean and Quinkcantle faced was Kazan lying flat on the floor like a wet rag, convulsing. And behind him, an odd scene was unfolding. First, there was a sharp-looking black-haired woman who had just sat down again at the table after resetting Kyujin's jaw. It was Misha. Brother Jean. Master, you're here? Haha. Surprisingly, Yuria was nestled in Misha's arms, and next to them was Lathri, serving cookies and tea. His hands were shaking like aspen leaves as he held the plate. Kashmir, Urian, Enya, and Gilly were also sitting at the table. Elisa was absent, busy with her guard duties. Kashmir was wearing a polite business smile, and Urian, like Lathri, was shaking his hands even with his poker face. Enya was a little better, but still had a somewhat stiff expression after seeing two people pass out in an instant. Only Gilly was calmly serving cookies on Misha's plate. Jean and Quinkcantle couldn't help but be dazed for a moment. Crazy, what's this? Wait, this woman was Misha? Jean recognized the face. She was the third mirage of the Mitra Desert, encountered right after overcoming Timar's energy. He quickly collected his thoughts. Although they didn't know why Misha had caused such a commotion as soon as she arrived, there was no use in panicking. I thought we hadn't met before, but it turns out we have. Pleasure to meet you, Great Black Dragon, Misha. I am Jean Runkendall. Misha nodded with an emotionless face. Right, since we didn't get a chance to talk in the desert, this is technically our first meeting. Nice to meet you, the 1,000-year contractor. Is that my foolish little brother you're holding? Yes, actually, we were just considering going to find you because of Murikan. As you can see. I know that. Cadden must have done something to him. I'll fix it later, so sit down for now. I don't want to waste time. Jet wisely took Murikan and went to the healers. Quinkcantle, have you been well? Yes, I've been well, Misha. You should have signaled if you were coming. You've become more beautiful since the last time I saw you. It's a shame for my brother, so I hope you forget about that guy soon. Quinkcantle coughed awkwardly and waved his hand. Don't start with that as soon as you see me. Misha, more importantly, his condition is really not good. I know. He must have been hit by Cadden. I'll fix it later, so tell me about what you've been doing. It's been a long time since I've visited, and I miss our talks. Chapter 229. The Power of the Black Dragon, 2. Quinkcantle decided to stop talking about Murikan. Seeing how indifferent Misha was towards him, she thought that Murikan might not be as serious danger as they had thought. It feels like a long time since we last saw each other, Misha. It must have been over 500 years. Didn't we see each other in Mila Kingdom 200 years ago? That seems likely. Anyway, it has been a long time. As you can see, I've been doing well. Thanks to that guy. I'm now living here with Olta's contractor. Quinkcantle gestured to Jean with a nod. Misha's gaze also fell on Jean. He's a smart and strong kid. I watched him go through the trial in the Mitra Desert. It was quite surprising when he finally reached Timar and swung his sword. Everyone in Tychon knew this story. Misha smiled as she recalled that time. But hidden within that seemingly meaningless smile was a long-held sorrow. Timar Runkendall. I felt it before, but there's something about him that reminds me of Timar, the original head of the Runkendells and the only man she had ever loved. After losing Timar, nothing remained in Misha's life but duty and obligation. As Sadrat's representative, she had to take care of things and prevent others from doing things. It was Misha's role to look after those whom Soldret had left behind. I didn't know you were watching me then. The trial was tough, so I had many moments that were less than graceful. It's a bit embarrassing. It's okay, you were impressive. Especially the image of you gnawing at a living creature. I wanted to ask you something. How did I find this place? Yes, Murikan. That fool couldn't escape my grasp. I cast a tracking spell on him when he was young, and he still doesn't know about it. He's so stupid. A tracking spell. So, I didn't need to trace your path every day. I already knew your route. A tracking spell that had lasted for thousands of years since Murikan's childhood. As the goosebumps started to rise, Quinkcantle burst into a soft laugh. You're still the same, Misha. It's been a while since I've seen someone fooled by you. Anyway, everyone believes whatever I say, even if it sounds like nonsense. Haha, indeed, there's no way such an absurd tracking spell exists. Jean laughed awkwardly and shrugged his shoulders. Murikin can only fight with his aura, but I can do a little more. For example, like this. Misha scooped up the shadow of her left hand on the table with her right hand. The next moment, Jean could only widen his eyes, as if he were a child seeing magic for the first time. What in the world? She was scooping up her left hand's shadow with her right hand, like scooping pudding with a spoon. The shadow didn't disappear as much as she scooped. All eyes were focused on the shadow gathered in Misha's right hand. Only Quinkcantle seemed familiar with this. Wow! Yuria exclaimed. Like a child, she reached out to touch it, and Misha watched her for a moment before blowing on the shadow in her hand. The shadow dispersed with her breath and flew towards Jean in thousands of particles. It looks like a galaxy flowing in the palm of my hand. Jean didn't avoid the shadow flying towards him. The moment the shadow touched him, it seeped in and disappeared. There was no change in Jean when the shadow seeped into his body. The only difference was that Misha's left arm shadow seemed to have faded a bit. That's right, there's no such magic. But it's possible with a power. The existence that my shadow touches, I can always locate. I put my shadow on that Murakan idiot when he was young. That's why I followed him and found you. Then Misha naturally put down Yuria. She then began to float above the heads of the group, scattering her body into aura. And that's how I got into the mansion without anyone noticing. It was a mysterious sight. The particles that made up Misha could condense or scatter at will, and when completely scattered, it just felt like there was a little black powder floating around. Home! The aura floating in the air gathered and settled between Jean and Quinkcantle. In an instant, it took the shape of a person and the color returned, revealing Misha again. Is that explanation enough? Just as Jean was about to nod his head. Oh no! It's not good to show your back so easily. Another voice identical to Misha's came from directly behind them. When they hurriedly turned around, there was Misha standing there. To the side, to the back, Misha was everywhere. Even in her original spot, another Misha was sitting, holding Yuria again. Quinkcantle was familiar with Misha's ability, but the rest of the group couldn't open their mouths for a while. They all had expressions of, "What are we even looking at?" Especially Lathri, who seemed ready to faint at any moment, having come face to face with a vague fear from his childhood, and seeing these abilities. Your guardian dragon is a coward, Yuria. But he's kind and cute. He seems to be. He also makes good cookies. Crunch, crunch. 3 Mishas simultaneously bit into a cookie. Each one was real, not an illusion. Indeed, the way Misha and Murikin manipulate Shadow Chi is different from me. I wonder if I can do it too. However, something more astonishing happened. Ah? Oh my god. Jean. Young Master? Urian, Kashmir, and Gilly all looked at one place and gasped. Following their gaze, Jean was left momentarily speechless. There stood another Jean Runkendall, with the same face, clothes, and eyes as Jean. Even Quinkcantle, who had seen much, kept glancing between Misha and the new Jean. Grinning, the newly appeared Jean approached the real Jean with a plate. Why don't you try one? His tone and speech were identical to the real Jean, causing confusion among the colleagues who were just watching. They couldn't tell who the real Jean was. It must be an unusual experience, encountering yourself when there's no mirror. Misha, who created the new Jean, acted as if it was nothing, which made it even more chilling. Crazy. This isn't a dragon born from a contractor, but a god itself. What if Misha wasn't an ally, but an enemy? A shiver ran down his spine at the thought. Whoosh! Only Misha holding Yuria remained, while the other Mishas and the Jean holding the plate dissolved into Shadow Chi. Jean and his comrades were still in shock. Does Joshua also have a being with such abilities attached to him? He was reminded of how terrifying the body duplication was. He probably never told you that this sort of thing was possible with Shadow Chi. That's correct. At that, Misha let out a sigh of relief. I'm glad. If he had told you, I would have smashed his head. And you would have been tortured by me until you forgot everything. Pardon. How does it feel to witness phenomena far removed from providence. Jean looked into Misha's serious eyes and answered, "It was terrifying. If the Jean Runkendall who gave me the cookie earlier could function somewhere else, wouldn't I become insignificant? Besides, I can't even begin to imagine how many past events there would be to prove that I'm the real one. No one in the world wants to exceed one of themselves, especially another me that doesn't follow the control of the real me." It wasn't calculated, but a genuine sentiment. However, Misha smiled, seemingly satisfied with the answer. She purposely displayed this power to protect him from temptation in the many battles he would face in the future. In Misha's view, Shadow Chi was a dangerous power for mortals to handle, including humans, dragons, beastmen, devils, and even gods, the contractor of 1,000 years, and undoubtedly the hope of the shadows. "I won't make you meet the same end as Timar. Fortunately, Murikin seems to be leading well so far. I will always be watching over you." Just as Misha was about to finish her sentence, Yuria grabbed her sleeve. Ajushi isn't like that. Neither Jean nor the other companions knew why Yuria said that. So, Jean chuckled at Yuria's serious face. "It's been a while since you called me Ajushi, Yuria. What suddenly isn't like what?" "Just, it's not." The only one who became thoughtful at that conversation was Misha. "Ajushi?" Moreover, she insightfully perceived my inner thoughts. "I expected it, but this child is definitely not by Jin's side by coincidence." Ajushi. That one word triggered countless questions in Misha's mind. Sodaret, their god, why hasn't he said anything so far? Why hasn't he communicated with the contractors? Why hasn't he even voiced a word to them? Maybe Jean is the reincarnation of Timar. Therefore, it is highly likely that Yuria saw Timar's image for a moment. No, maybe. She might have seen Sodaret in Jean. Asmil, the contract holder of the pupil. Even for a superior contractor like Yuria, it was entirely possible. For now, it was an issue she couldn't conclude on. Misha hid her expression and stroked Yuria's head. "Anyway, it's not bad to occasionally come out and talk with people like this." You. Gilly, was it?" "Yes, Lady Misha. I'll need a few days to fix that idiot brother of mine, so during that time, choose a room for me to use. I'll choose the best room. Please list any necessary items." "Thank you. I want to have a drink with Quincantl in my room, so please prepare a few bottles of good alcohol. Preferably something aged over 100 years from Mila Mountain." "Understood. Jean, we'll talk more tomorrow." As Misha turned around, she seemed to remember something and looked at Gilly again. "And you should be careful." "Pardon? You're too much his type. If he tries anything funny, cut him off in one stroke." All Gilly could do was cough awkwardly. Chapter 230. The Power of the Black Dragon, 3. When Misha and Quincantl went to their room, stunned friends Kazan and Beriz returned to the reception room. They wore flabbergasted and dazed expressions. "Are you both okay?" "I apologize. I got excited for a moment when I heard that Beriz was hit. I keep showing you a third-rate side of me." Kazan bowed his head deeply, causing Jean to wave his hand dismissively. "Well, it's human-like and good. It's okay. If Gilly had been hit, I would have lost my mind too. I just asked if she was a thief. Considering the circumstances, this is messed up." Beriz clenched her jaw, grimacing greatly. Even though the healers had treated her, she still felt a numb sensation up to her gums. Beriz couldn't shake off the feeling of injustice. Since the Bluebird incident, it had been a month. She had been in Taiken for a month now. The first week was unbearable, living like an invalid due to the fact that she had been serving Joshua, her true enemy, and losing her magic. At that time, she had no choice because the aftereffects of the reflux phenomenon were too severe. However, from the second week, Beriz decided to try to become accustomed to this place with Kazan. Although her treatment hadn't finished and her magic hadn't returned, she did everything she could from cleaning to laundry. She was stubborn, even when others told her she didn't need to do such things. If she didn't do so, she felt like she would become a useless person. So yesterday, she was helping Lathri prepare the tea, and faced an unexpected situation. For simply asking an unfamiliar woman if she was a thief. "Master, should I bring some ice?" Again with the master thing. "Are you crazy? Who's master? You taught me the theory and principles of wind-related magics. You even handed down a 5-star magic. You're a master. If that's the case, then all the teachers at Beeman Academy are your masters. Stop talking nonsense and get." Of course, losing her magic didn't mean her foul temper disappeared. "I never learned it. Do you think I don't know how the academy lectures are structured? They teach theories in the beginner classes." "Stop lying." "But I really never learned. I was discriminated against. Anyway, I'll bring the ice, so please teach me other magics." Enya saw herself in berries, surprisingly. Neither their appearances nor personalities were alike, but Enya felt a sense of kinship for this reason. Maybe she was nothing more than a burden to the people here. After visiting the Dark Magic Council's cave, Enya desperately trained and studied whenever she had the opportunity. TL's note: Dark Magic Council was referred to as Dark Magic Association in Reaper's TL. Therefore, Enya, while being stubborn and persistent, learned magic one by one from Berries, who was adjusting to the place. As Enya ran to fetch ice, Berries shook her head in disbelief. "Losing my magic. Everyone seems to take me lightly." Although she said that, Berries snatched the ice brought by Enya and applied it to her jaw. "Now, since I've received this, you promised. Teach me a new magic." "When did I?" "I'll be waiting in the underground training room in the evening." "Then, Master Jean, I'll go ahead." Before Berries could yell, Enya quickly left the reception room. "Ah, my head hurts. Kazan, why are there people like that? My mood is already bad." Jean looked at Berries, laughing quietly. "Berries, here's some advice. It's best to watch what you say to Enya around her master, Quinkcantle. Regardless of your intentions, she will beat you up. I can't stop her, and if you get hit, Kazan will lose his mind, right? Then Kazan will also get hit. It's a vicious cycle." Berries wasn't just a murderous maniac. Although her expressions were extremely, seriously clumsy, she felt a sense of gratitude towards Jean and the people of Tychon. So, even though she complained whenever Enya made an excuse, she taught her magic. Jean felt that truth, so even if Berries acted a bit savage, he let it slide. Humph. When Berries abruptly turned and left, Kazan bowed to Jean on her behalf. "I apologize, Master Jean. I'll explain it to her so she understands." "Leave it, she's doing well with Enya." Even Gilly often praises Berries for being more helpful than expected. In fact, for Kazan and Berries, Tychon was a strangely bright land. From a young age, they barely remember they were raised as hunting dogs in the lunar sacrifice, exploited, then lost Taman and went under Joshua. The world they had experienced was unspeakably dark and damp. But now they were slowly realizing what it meant to live as a human. Urian was the same. "Have you been uncomfortable lately, Urian?" "No." "That's good." He didn't say anything more. He was still stuck in fear of Joshua and the fact that the guardian dragon was captured. His character was extremely introverted and he didn't talk much. It was curious how he had lived under Joshua with those scary nights. The power of the god of thunder, Graham. If there's a way to fully contain it in Sigmund, then I'll have to revisit the Bluebird Island with that guy. Enhancing Urian's authority like Joshua did was not a bad idea. If Urian completely became Jin's ally. Currently, in Jin's mind, Urian was closer to a freeloader than a subordinate, and Kazan and Berries were closer to subordinates than comrades. "Sir Kashmir." "Yes, sir." "Has there been any news related to the Holy Kingdom while I was away?" "After you left, I met with the officials along with Bran. They seemed reluctant to speak. Of course, I mentioned that our trade business in Tychon might be affected. Fortunately, we had a few trade ships passing through Santel." "You've worked hard. You also smell something fishy, don't you?" "Yes. I believe the Holy Kingdom of Vankella can no longer be considered neutral. This time, they have clearly aided Zipfel. There hasn't been a single proper article about it yet. The ones who blockaded Santel were the heretic judgment knights from the Dawn Guardians of Doctrine. Moreover, they were even brainwashing the common people within the city. It seems they had to hide the events of that day, even by violating King Miklin's edict. Or perhaps, King Miklin was on Zipful's side from the beginning. That was the worst-case scenario. If the Holy Kingdom had already completely sided with Zipful, problems would inevitably arise when the Runkendels began a full-fledged succession war. Countless Guardian Knights would die or get hurt, and they wouldn't be able to receive support from the exceptional healers of the Holy Kingdom. Or if they did receive support, they would have to pay an incomparably hefty price. This was a problem that applied not only to Jean but to all warriors in Runkendel, and even further in Hufster. That's how excellent the healing power and various medicines of the Holy Kingdom were. There is a possibility of that, but we should hope it's not the case. Also, I met Lonnie Salome, the adopted daughter of the king, there. King Miklin is known as a doting father who cherishes his daughter. I've heard related anecdotes several times. But sending his own daughter to aid Zipful suggests that the Holy Kingdom has already. No, Lonnie was different from the other knights and saints there. If she hadn't been there, Murikin would have been caught by Zipful, or he wouldn't have survived. Jean explained the situation in detail. He told about meeting Lonnie, rescuing Murikin, and how the battle between Cadden and Murikin unfolded. Lonnie said that the Holy Kingdom was corrupt, colluding with power, and covering up the truth. So she decided to help us. After all, it was Cadden, not Murikin, who slaughtered the common people. You received great help, my lord. Yes, I've thought about it, and perhaps King Miklin placed Lonnie in the Dawn Guardians to keep an eye on them. You're saying that not the entire Holy Kingdom, but some factions like the Dawn Society, may have joined hands with Zipful? That's right. It seems more likely to me as well. Remembering the recent policies of the Holy Kingdom, most of them would have been disliked by the internal vested interests. The prohibition of persuasion magic was also part of it. Miklin had abolished persuasion magic 20 years ago. Both the Jean of his previous life and the current Jean were too young to remember the intense backlash that occurred within the Holy Kingdom at that time. On the other hand, Kashmir, being a member of the royal family, hadn't forgotten the consecutive meetings and countless related articles that poured out at Beemont at that time. Violating the most powerful and easiest method of evangelism and conversion was bound to cause such a reaction. But the vested interests of the Holy Kingdom joining Zipful just because of resentment seems a bit lacking. Especially with a huge force like Zipful, there's a high risk of becoming a mere servant if they bring in the wrong people. You're right, my lord. If that were the case, it would have been better to conspire and depose the king. We need to investigate properly. I have a feeling that a more complicated relationship will come out than expected. First, please find out about Lonnie Salome. Given that one of the 5 captains of the Dawn Society was talking about disciplining her, she must be under disciplinary action if King Miklin couldn't stop it. I understand. As Sir Murikin's great benefactor, I will prepare a way to compensate her without discomfort. The next morning, Murakin's condition noticeably improved. The fever that was like a fireball completely disappeared, and he was strutting around the corridors of Tychon with his tail raised like any other vibrant cat. His fever had naturally gone down without the need for healers to intervene. Mia, meow. There were also moments when Shuri often knocked Murikin down on the floor and played with him like a ball. Should we just leave him like that? He seems happy in his own way. How about letting him live like that, Jean? It'll save us some air. Misha. I'm joking. If he was even half as cute as he is now when he was sane, it would have been nice. From now on, even if you hear some rather noisy sounds, including screams, just wait. Got it. Misha's shadow fell over Murikin lying on the floor. She looked down at Murikin and grinned a sinister smile.